In 2010, a gold and copper mine in Chile collapsed, trapping 33 miners underground. At first, the men had to survive off of only a spoon of tuna and 2 cookies a day, which soon turned into 1 cookie every 3 days. One man experienced temporary blindness. Tension between the men grew, and the body odor got so bad that one miner said it smelt worse than dying corpses. It took 69 days for the men to be rescued. In 1961, Leonid Rogozov went on a 12-person expedition to the Antarctic. As time went on, he began to feel ill. He realized it was appendicitis, a condition that could be life-threatening if left untreated. Being the only physician on the trip, he knew he would have to handle it himself. He made his fellow explorers surgical assistants and got to work, using his sense of touch to guide him instead of sight, and taking breaks every couple of minutes to prevent blacking out. After 2 hours, he successfully removed the inflamed appendix and stitched his wound closed. In 2007, 75-year-old Mona Shaw walked into a Comcast office and smashed everything in sight with a hammer because she was fed up with the terrible customer service. Shaw arranged for Comcast to install its phone, cable, and internet service. The Comcast installer showed up 2 days after the scheduled date and didn't even finish the installation. After that, Comcast cut all service at Shaw's home. Shaw and her husband go to Comcast's office and request a manager. They were promised one would be there shortly, but after waiting 2 hours, they were told that the manager had left for the day. After days of frustration, she returned to the office, hammer in hand, and smashed their keyboard, phone, and monitor, while repeatedly asking, "Do I have your attention now?" She was fined $345, banned from the Comcast office for a year, and switched to Verizon and DirecTV for her phone and TV service. When he was young, Greek philosopher Diogenes' personality wasn't anything extraordinary, but once he moved to Athens, he started to adopt a new, eccentric personality. He lived as a homeless beggar, wanting to rely on others' charity. He willingly threw away all he possessed, except for a few rags to cover his naked body and a wooden bowl for food and drink, which he discarded once he realized he could just use his hands. Diogenes frequently attended Plato's classes, eating as loudly as he could in order to disturb the lectures. He showed little respect for social conventions and was known to masturbate and pee in public, including on Plato's seat in his own academy. It's said that when Alexander the Great visited him while he was resting in the sun and asked if he could do anything for the philosopher, Diogenes said, "Yes, you could move out of my light." In 2003, college student Ken Jones attempted to climb Romania's highest mountain when he was buried by 2 avalanches. He was traveling alone in sub-zero weather and was nearly 8,000 feet high when he was hit. The impact broke his leg and crushed his pelvis. Yet somehow Jones found the strength to spend the next 3 days digging himself out of the mess and crawling down the mountain. He dragged himself to a nearby village and was taken to a hospital. Once there, he had the majority of his stomach removed due to stress-induced ulcers and was given a 30% chance of survival. But he fully recovered and became the creator of many elite fitness events. In 2003, Aaron Ralston was out exploring a canyon when his arm got pinned down by an 800-pound boulder. He was trapped 100 feet underground, with the nearest road being 20 miles away. And to make matters worse, he had told no one where he was going. He knew that if he wanted to survive, he had to find a way to sever his arm. He tied his arm with a tourniquet, broke his bones, and used his knife to cut through his skin, muscle, and tendons. Once free, he climbed back through the canyon, rappelled down a cliff, all with only one arm, and walked 6 miles until he found a family that was taking a hike. They contacted the authorities, and Aaron was taken to a hospital. His life was saved, and the movie, 127 Hours, was created based on his experience. In 2000, 40-year-old Inez Ramirez Perez was at home when she made medical history by being the first woman to perform a C-section on herself in which both the baby and the mother survived. Due to a previous obstructed labor, she believed trying to deliver another baby vaginally would result in another failed birth. In her eyes, going the C-section route was the best option. She had no previous medical training and only had her younger kids by her side. Her husband was at a bar and didn't have a phone on him. The process took over an hour, but eventually Perez was able to reach into her uterus and pull out her baby. When Olga of Kiev's husband was murdered by neighboring tribe, the Drevlians, she vowed revenge and went on a murder spree. When some of the tribe members traveled to her to negotiate a marriage with their leader, Mal, the man who helped murder her husband, she buried them alive as soon as they got there. She invited more Drevlians, pretended to be interested in the marriage proposal, and then burned them alive when they entered a bathhouse to freshen up. She decided to visit the Drevlian city. They were oblivious to what she had done, so when she invited them to a funeral banquet for her husband, they attended, and once they got drunk, Olga had her soldiers slaughter thousands of the Drevlians. She then had their whole city burned to the ground. She sold some of the survivors into slavery, killed others, and left a few alone to try and rebuild the city themselves. Not so fun fact part 3. The movie The Greatest Showman was about the infamous P.T. Barnum, but a fact few people know about is the decision that kicked off his career. The decision to buy Joyce Heth, an enslaved 80-year-old black woman who was blind and almost completely paralyzed. Barnum paraded her around the country, making thousands by fooling people into believing she was George Washington's 161-year-old mammy, and allegedly pulled out her teeth to make her look older. When she died, her autopsy was done in public. Barnum let her corpse be cut open in front of 1,500 paying spectators. In 2013, a boat with 12 crew members was flipped over by heavy ocean swells. Harrison O'Keene was the only survivor. He was using the bathroom when the boat started going down. He opened the door and saw 3 crew members get sucked into the sea. Water rushed into the bathroom, trapping him with only a 4-square-foot air bubble to live off of. As time went on, he could smell the dead bodies of his crewmates floating around and could hear fish come to eat them. He was somehow surviving at depths that could be fatal to experienced divers. The salt water took the skin off of his body and tongue. He was there for nearly 3 days until 2 divers came to his rescue. In 2006, 51-year-old Susan Walters managed to overpower and kill a man who tried to murder her in her home. Shockingly, the assailant was a hitman her husband Mike hired to kill her. After nearly 17 years of an unhappy marriage, Susan filed for divorce. Mike was furious. He offered to pay his co-worker, Ed, $50,000 to murder his wife. When Susan entered her home late at night, Ed was hiding in the dark, waiting for her. He snuck up on her and hit her in the temple with a hammer. Susan, who trained regularly in self-defense, fought back. She punched, bit, and even hit him with his own hammer. After nearly 15 minutes of fighting for her life, Susan was able to lock Ed in a chokehold and keep him there until he stopped breathing. She got up and stumbled over to her neighbor's house to call 911. Later, she found Ed's backpack in the basement of her home with a day planner inside. It had the words, "Call Mike," and Mike's phone number written on Monday, 2 days before the attack. While working on his farm, Curtis Kaser's leg got caught in a grain auger, a device meant to transport large amounts of grain. The more he tried to pull his leg out, the faster it got sucked in. He didn't have his phone to call for help and had little time before he was completely mutilated. He took out his pocket knife and started sawing at his leg, slicing through his skin, muscles, and tendons. Once free, he crawled back home to call for help. First responders arrived and took him to the hospital. He survived and used the subsequent media attention to advise others to always take their time and pay attention to their surroundings. In 1986, 22-year-old flight attendant Nirja Banot saved hundreds of lives when a flight was hijacked by terrorists in Pakistan before takeoff. Banot immediately got to work, helping the pilots escape, serving the frightened passengers drinks and food to keep them calm, and hiding the American passengers' passports once the hijackers started hunting for Westerners. After 17 hours of their plan not progressing, the hijackers opened gunfire. Banot managed to unlock the emergency exit and got as many people out as she could, but she was soon shot to death while trying to guide children to the exit. This terrible event claimed 20 lives and left over 100 injured. In 2008, 56-year-old Alina Hansen was mauled by a bear on her secluded ranch in the mountains. The bear grabbed her by the ears, tore them off, and started chewing on her face. Her dogs jumped in to help, and while they kept the bear busy, Alina got up, walked back through the mountains, got in her car, and drove 4 miles to the nearest fire station, all with half her face hanging off and an eye hanging out of its socket. As if the bear attack wasn't enough, Alina had another nightmare waiting for her, in the form of the healthcare industry. Her insurance company refused to pay for anything they didn't deem necessary for her survival. They ended up covering only $10,000 worth, leaving Alina to pay around $250,000.